Imagine a palace bathed in candlelight, its walls dripping with gold, its corridors echoing with laughter and music. To the outside world, it is a vision of power and glory, a sanctuary of kings and queens who ruled as if chosen by destiny itself. But behind those velvet curtains and gilded doors lies a silence darker than any dungeon. There was once a princess who lived in that world, born of royal blood, surrounded by splendor, and yet her very existence became a threat so dangerous, the empire itself conspired to erase her. Her name was struck from the records, her portrait vanished from the walls, her story was swallowed by shadows. Why? What secret did she carry that terrified the throne? What scandal could shatter the foundations of a dynasty so completely that history itself was rewritten to forget her? Tonight, we peel back the layers of deception, step into the storm of forbidden love, hidden children, and conspiracies buried beneath centuries of silence. This is the untold story of royal blood secret, the princess history tried to erase. The palace was a world of contradictions. Its halls dazzled with chandeliers, its floors glimmered with marble, its gardens bloomed with roses kissed by fountains of crystal. Yet for the princess, these wonders were not freedom, they were chains. From childhood, her life was scripted. At dawn she was dressed not for comfort, but for display, silks and jewels chosen to project perfection. Tutors drilled her not in curiosity, but in obedience. Every smile was measured, every gesture rehearsed. She was trained to be seen, not to be heard. At grand banquets, she glittered like a jewel, admired by nobles who whispered of her beauty, but behind their eyes flickered suspicion. Rumors had begun to swirl about her bloodline, about whether she was truly of royal descent. Some claimed her mother's past was tainted. Others hinted the king himself feared what her existence represented. At night, alone in her chamber, she pressed her hands against the cold glass of her window, staring beyond the palace walls. Did she dream of freedom? Did she long to live as more than a pawn? Her gilded cage sparkled with gold, but its bars were iron, and soon, the whispers that haunted her childhood would grow into storms that threatened her very life. The royal court was more dangerous than any battlefield. Wars were fought not with swords, but with secrets, and the princess had become the center of those secrets. By her teenage years, her presence was a topic of constant speculation. Courtiers lowered their voices when she passed, masks of courtesy, hiding daggers of suspicion. Not rightful, some murmured. Too dangerous, whispered others. She was watched more closely than ever. At masquerade balls, nobles passed secret letters, while music swelled and dancers twirled. Ministers met in candlelit chambers, debating her future in hushed tones. She was still paraded at ceremonies, still forced to smile for the empire's glory, but the unease in the air grew thicker. What made her so dangerous? Was it her rumored illegitimacy? Was it the possibility that her bloodline could fracture the dynasty? Or was it the whispers of something even more scandalous? A forbidden love that could not be hidden forever. The court thrived on gossip, but this gossip had teeth. The empire was beginning to see her not as a daughter of royalty, but as a liability. And when an empire fears, it does not forgive. It strikes. Every dynasty has rules, and for a princess, the first rule was simple. Love was not her own. Marriages were not chosen by the heart, but by the throne. A husband was not a partner, but a treaty. But the princess broke this rule. Somewhere in the shadows of her gilded prison, she discovered a bond she was never meant to form. Who he was remains uncertain. Some say a noble courtier of minor standing. Others whisper of a soldier whose loyalty lay with her, not the crown. Whatever the truth, one fact remains. The princess loved. Their meetings were hidden, stolen in brief glances across crowded halls, fleeting moments in the palace gardens, or whispered words in candlelit rooms. Every touch, every look was rebellion. For the first time, she was not a pawn. She was a woman, choosing for herself. But palaces have no secrets, servants noticed. Courtiers raised eyebrows. Whispers spread like fire. Soon, the rumors were undeniable. The princess was entangled in a scandal, one that could humiliate the dynasty, weaken the crown, and challenge the very idea of royal purity. Love, in her case, was not affection. It was treason, and treason demanded consequences. If whispers of love shook the palace, whispers of a child threatened to bring it crashing down. The story is murky, shrouded in silence, but fragments remain. Somewhere behind closed doors, away from the glittering halls, a child was born. A child whose blood carried both the sacred lineage of royalty and the forbidden mark of scandal. For the empire, this was more than a private sin. It was a political disaster. A child of uncertain legitimacy was a weapon waiting to be wielded by rivals, a shadow that could destabilize the throne. The response was swift. Midwives were silenced. Records vanished. The existence of the child was denied. To the world, nothing had happened. The princess continued to appear at ceremonies, her smile rehearsed, her beauty intact. But in the shadows of her life, everything had changed. What became of the child? Some say the baby was smuggled away to live with a loyal family, growing up in obscurity with a secret legacy. Others believe the child was hidden within the palace itself, raised under false names, and darker whispers suggest the child never lived at all, that the empire acted to extinguish the threat before it could ever breathe. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain: the princess had crossed a line that could never be undone. Her secret was now the empire's greatest fear. Power rests on fragile foundations. Crowns may glitter, armies may march, but dynasties are built on belief. The belief that royal blood is pure, chosen, unquestionable. The princess and her hidden scandal threatened to unravel that belief. In council chambers, ministers argued fiercely. Some demanded she be married off quickly, her scandal buried beneath the appearance of legitimacy. Others called for harsher measures, exile, confinement, or even permanent silence. The king himself faced an impossible truth. To acknowledge her child was to weaken the throne. To deny it was to live in fear of rebellion. For rivals beyond the empire's borders, the scandal was an opportunity. For courtiers within, it was leverage. And for the common people, it was a reminder that even those wrapped in gold were not untouchable. The princess, once celebrated as a jewel of the crown, had become its most dangerous liability. Fear spread through the palace like a poison. Guards shadowed her steps. Spies listened at her doors. Even her smiles were weighed as potential threats. And in the silence of those marble corridors, a decision began to take shape. The princess could not remain free. The empire would soon act. The shift was subtle at first. Her name was spoken less in ceremonies. Her portraits began to vanish from the palace walls. Invitations to public gatherings became fewer. What had once been a life of constant display turned into a slow erasure. Then came the day the walls closed, and the princess was escorted to a secluded wing of the palace. To the outside world, it was said she was unwell and required rest. But those who served her knew the truth. She was a prisoner in silks and velvet, confined behind locked doors. Her freedom stolen. Her chambers were comfortable, but suffocating. Guards stood at the entrance. Servants delivered meals in silence. Letters she wrote were intercepted. Visitors came rarely, and when they did, they spoke in whispers, their eyes filled with pity or fear. The empire believed it was solving a problem. By confining her, they hoped the scandal would fade. But in truth, the very act of silencing her made her more dangerous. For now, she was no longer a princess in sight. She was a mystery, a shadow, a story people longed to know, and the longer she remained locked away, the louder the whispers became. The fall from grace was complete. Yet the storm had only just begun. Then, without warning, she was gone. One day, the guards stood outside her chamber. The next, the doors were empty. The empire offered no explanation, no announcement, no funeral, no official record. The princess, who had once dazzled the halls of power, had simply vanished. What truly happened remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Some believe she was poisoned, her death disguised as illness, her body buried in an unmarked grave. Others claim she was forced into a convent, living her final years in silence behind cloistered walls, her royal identity erased. There are even legends that she escaped, smuggled out of the palace, raising her hidden child in secrecy far from the empire that sought to destroy her. The truth is lost in shadows, but the effect was undeniable. Her absence became a haunting presence. The very attempt to erase her only deepened curiosity. People whispered of her fate for generations, creating myths and legends that refused to die. The empire had tried to erase a life. Instead, it created a ghost, and that ghost haunted them more than her presence ever could. The empire thought it had one. It had silenced the princess, removed her from the records, buried her story beneath layers of denial. But history is not so easily tamed. Her memory lived on in fragments, in the diaries of nobles who dared hint at her existence, in tavern songs that spoke of a bird in a gilded cage, in the whispers of servants who remembered the beauty and sorrow in her eyes. For the people, she became a legend, a tragic heroine who dared to defy, a symbol of resistance against the suffocating weight of power. A reminder that even crowns of gold cannot control the human heart. Foreign courts used her story as gossip, a weakness to mock the empire. Historians, centuries later, pieced together fragments, finding gaps in records where her name should have been, finding evidence of portraits deliberately destroyed. Every missing detail only made the story more powerful, and so the echoes remained, not clear, not complete, but undeniable. The empire had erased her name, but it could not erase the truth. She had lived, she had resisted, and she had mattered. Her silence became her voice. Her absence became her legacy. The story of the princess is more than a tale of one life. It is a mirror reflecting the cruelty of power. It shows us how far empires will go to protect themselves, how easily truth can be rewritten, and how fragile the line is between memory and oblivion. She was not the first to be silenced, nor will she be the last. Throughout history, countless voices have been erased. Women whose lives were inconvenient, children whose bloodlines threatened dynasties, rebels whose visions unsettled thrones. Their names are missing, but their absence speaks. And so we must ask, how much of history is truth, and how much is silence? What stories still lie buried, waiting to be uncovered? The empire thought it had destroyed her, but by remembering her, now, we defy that silence. Her story returns from the shadows. Her ghost lives on. This is the royal blood secret, the princess history tried to erase.